Welcome to the Clearly Well podcast. I'm Elizabeth McKeon, a board-certified psychiatric mental health and addiction recovery nurse. This podcast aims to bridge the gap between mental health and substance use discussions, fostering understanding and empathy while reducing stigma. Join us as we amplify the voices of those with lived experiences, creating a non-judgmental space for their stories to be heard. Thank you for tuning in. Okay. Welcome to the Clearly Well podcast. This is Elizabeth McKeon. I'm here with Kayla. We have her wrap-up episode, number 3. I'm so excited to have you in studio. Yay!
Me too. This is where recovery gets real.
Are you going back to Miami soon?
Like soon? Yeah.
Real soon?
Yeah.
Oh, dang.
Yeah. But I'm back all the time. So.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Good. We'll do like a all catch up episode with all the.
I'm back at least
once
a month. So.
Oh, very nice. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let's go. So last episode, you are at the ranch.
Yes.
And you are doing like EMDR. You're going through all of the therapy.
Yes.
And guys, if you have not, this is number 3 of Kayla. So please go back and listen to episode 1 and 2.
So good.
If you're just turning in. And I've got Brittany Rockmore here in the house today too. And just so happens these guys are friends. So this has been really cool.
Oh yeah, we go way back.
Way back.
Way back.
So you're in recovery. Let's go.
Okay. So I'm in recovery. So now I am kind of in that step down phase. I've had a lot of changes. I told you guys I've been praying for this. Remember the deer? I was like, Lord, show me a deer if you're really there, all this stuff. And I did not see a deer the whole time I was in treatment, just so you guys know. But I did look for it every time I had the minute to get outside to be like, God, are you real? But there were some really amazing things happening in my life at the time because I was like really healing. I was having a lot of breakthroughs. It was incredible. But I still have like all of this stuff going on with my son, the custody case. It wasn't looking good because I also was fighting a criminal case where they wanted me to do prison time because I had fled those charges, got in trouble a bunch. So now we're talking a couple weeks before I have to turn myself back in. So it's like 2 weeks before I have to turn myself back in. And I had to go back to Raven County Detention Center to then be extradited to South Carolina. So the weight of that really is what is going to tell if I'm going to also get custody of my son. Because obviously if I'm in prison, I can't take care of him. So I kind of got to this point.
And wait a minute. Does your mom have...
No, she was still fighting.
Okay.
She was still fighting as well. So during this time, what was really hard too is who he was with at the time, like there was a lot of... strife, and so I was not like getting to see him as much or talk to him as much. There was a lot of stressors. It wasn't easy, but I had to really walk through that type of powerlessness and still focus on working on myself. And I'll never forget just kind of going through the process. I would go, at this point I was out of treatment, so I was able to kind of be in the free world, but with limitations like curfews and all these things, because I was living in a recovery residence where you have like rules, there's structure, and I was still tied to a program. But I would go out and I would go running every day. And so during that time when I would go running, it was also my time to like reflect, and I would be talking to God. A lot of my talks with God were kind of me like being angry and like asking God, like, why is this all happening? Like kind of just conflicting with him to say like, well, what if I'm doing all of this and it's for nothing? Like, what if I don't get my son back? And just, I would still have this like back and forth battle with
you weren't
like
fully like, in the ownership of it.
Correct.
Okay.
I was still like struggling with that thought of like, what if I'm doing all of this for no reason? And I'm still struggling with the shame, so your healing journey takes time. And at this point it was like 8.5 months into my recovery journey. And I had done a lot of healing, but there was still so much work to be done. But I remember, I'll never forget this day. I was out and I was listening to my music. I was on the trail and I was running and I was, talking to God. And then I got to this point where I was just like, God, what if I don't get Cooper back? And I kind of stopped. And at that point, it kind of just like clicked for me. And I just felt like this presence of like this, I can't even describe it, just like this presence and this warmth and this just like love. And I just remember thinking like, God, you've like carried me this far. Like it is a miracle. It is a miracle where I'm at right now. And I just like started to just trust and be like, you know what's best for me. And I just remember saying this, like, you know what's best for me. If I have to go to prison, it's because I have to help somebody. If I don't get Cooper back, like, you know what's best for him too. If I could trust you with my life, then I have to trust you with his. And even if I don't get him back, I want to be ready to be a mom, whether it be when he's 18, whatever. I want to be ready for that relationship. And so I just remember like having this just like revelation of like, no matter what, I'm going to walk this path of recovery. No matter what, I'm going to trust you. And I just started like crying. And I felt like the presence of God. I can't even describe it because it was just like this. It was so, I don't even have words. And I was just like crying and I fell to my knees and I just was like surrendering. It was just like this process of like really surrendering. And I'm just like crying and I'm on my knees and I'm out on this trail. And I kid you not, like I look up and like from me to like that guitar over there, so like not less than like 10 feet, there's like a family of deer. And so then I'm just like, I know. Then I'm just like really boohoo crying. I'm just like, oh my gosh. And at that moment I felt God
was so
say,
waiting for you to tell me that. Like, that was what I was sitting here waiting for. Was there actually a deer? And
Yeah.
no, there was a family.
There was a family of deer. And because God is not just like, God was just like showing out. Okay. But I started crying and I just, in that moment felt like God had heard every prayer, seen every tear. He was with me in every single moment of my life, the good, the bad, the ugly, all of it. He was there. And I just like stood there in this moment and I just like was like boohoo crying. And
there's your burning bush.
That was my burning bush. Yep. And it was not necessarily the fact that there was deer there as it was the fact that I was able to surrender and trust God no matter what. And like his grace is so good and he's just so loving and he's so intentional that he did that in that most perfect divine time for me, knowing that he was reaching to my heart. And it was more about, I was already okay with the outcome. So it wasn't like this happened and I'm just like, okay, God, I'm doing this because you're going to do this for me. It was that like I had truly surrendered, whatever that looks like.
You took that ownership.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's probably what he was waiting for.
Yeah. And he was. And so from that moment, I, started getting ready to go back to Raven County Detention Center, was packing everything up and just going through the process of all of that. And like literally 2 weeks after that, my probation officer reached out and like the courts and all of that. And they were dismissing all my charges because they had followed my life for that whole 9 months. And they were just like astonished with the transformation. And so they were going to dismiss those charges and I wasn't going to have to go back to jail, which was like a freaking miracle. And I was like, I just remember being like, this is so surreal because I was prepared and I was going, and then literally 2 weeks after that, I had my day in court and the judge was like, I knew you'd come back and I knew you'd do this. And he was so happy to give me custody of my son. And it was like, oh God.
It's so good.
Yeah, it was so good. And it was so awesome. And I just knew like at that point, whatever I was going to do with my life for the rest of my life, I wanted to help people. I wanted people to know that there was hope. I wanted people to know that recovery is real. And it doesn't matter like what you're going through, how far you've gone down that path, that God loves you. And so I remember praying, I was just like, God, whatever it looks like, I just want to help people. I don't care, just whatever. And
just for our listeners, we cry on this podcast.
We do.
Sean gets real tired, but we do. We cry over here.
It's because we're girls.
Good, and it's good stuff.
Yeah.
No, we don't.
Actually, Sean's crying. That's okay. Todd cried, I think, at least 6 times on his.
Oh, yeah. Todd's a crybaby. He is, but we love him. Okay. So I had my day in court. Everything was kind of aligning. I told you earlier that like the one thing I didn't want to do was move back to South Florida. Yep. But I'll never forget, God blocked every single avenue for me to go anywhere else but South Florida. And now I know why. So
tell me what that's about.
Yes.
I'm excited.
Oh, I'm so excited. Okay. So I reunified with my son at my mom's house, which was awesome because that was a relationship that needed restoration. And so I reunified with my son there. My mom had been getting support from her friend who worked at the Department of Children and Families in Florida, and she had followed my entire story, my journey of recovery, all of that. So she wanted me to interview for a job as a peer specialist. And this was back in 2017. I had no idea what a peer specialist was. And they had a really hard time explaining it too, but they were like, you get to help people. Like, you're going to help people like you. And, you know, you can use your lived experience and stuff like that. I was like, oh, I'm game. Like, if I can help people, absolutely. So I went for a job interview and I ended up meeting the CEO of a nonprofit, an RCO, Recovery Community Organization. And she sat in my interview, and it was like the weirdest interview because I've never been in an interview like this where it was just literally my story. You know, it was like I just shared with her like my raw story, my desire to help people. Like, it had nothing to do with like my work experience, like my skill sets of this. Like, I could do it. Was
so true.
Yeah. And it was just like, it was so wild. And she just took me under her wing and she invited me to come back to her RCO, and I started volunteering, and I started to like work in peer work, and I was like loving it. And I started to help people that were going through some similar things that I've gone through. And I first was working with like families that were struggling with substance use and mental health, that were endangered of losing custody of their children. And so I started to work to restore and help the families before they have the removal.
Isn't that so fantastic?
Oh, it was incredible. I remember I write every year a reflective letter to God. And I just remember like it was in December when I got hired, and I was just like, oh my gosh, God, like I have this is like a dream. Like, this is the job of my dreams. Like, I am so happy. Like, every day I get excited to go to work. Like, I never thought that would happen. Like, I just don't even feel like it's work because I just feel like this is like missional. Like, it's just so exciting.
No, I say, Brittany, don't we say we're just over here doing God's work?
That's it, man. And you just never get bored of it, you know? And so,
and I'm not an extremely religious person. But when you know that you're doing the work of the Lord, like because of how you're affecting people, and you're just so blessed to be in this industry, you can't help but say that.
Yeah.
And it's so true.
Yeah, for sure. And I never was either, but it was like, God was like so evident in my life. Like, he was doing miracles left and right. I'm just like, do people see this? Like, what is going on here? And so I just was like, whatever, I'm going to trust in you, God, and like whatever path you have for me. And so I started with child welfare. Then I moved into like working in the jails, because like my story crosses over on so much that I was able to intersect at every point to support people. So then, as I'm like, my most favorite thing in life is to watch other people like have their transformation, and to watch them like experience like love and grace for the first time, and to start to have like just amazing things happen in their life through their recovery process. You know, I love watching that. I love watching people become redeemed and restored, and then to like want to go out and help other people. It's the best thing in the world. Is I tell people like that's the high that I've chased every day now, is like great. Seeing that in other people.
And I always say, like, I don't care how someone gets into recovery, whether it's recovery through incarceration, recovery through God, whether it's, you know, celebrate recovery, AA, NA, like, well, I don't care, like how you do it.
Me neither. I think it's all beautiful. I tell people, here's this mountain. There's 1,000 ways to climb it. Let's just climb it together. You know, like that's, it's beautiful no matter how it comes, but you know, it comes. I just feel like God speaks to each of us so intentionally that he knows how it needs to come. So, you know, he's working in the midst of all of that, because part of my story was recognizing that like in even my worst moments, God was there. And he like showed me that, like he showed me all of the seeds of where like he was there. Like, oh, you thought that was you? No, that was me. You thought that was luck? No, that was me. You think like it was
I'm
him.
Sorry. There's no such thing as luck.
No.
I don't know why people say I got lucky today.
No,
like that's not luck.
It's not. It was definitely God. And so I started working at the Recovery Community Organization, and I, you know, worked in drug court. I worked in the jails. I worked with child welfare. I worked with youth, did a lot of outreach, started to do a lot of advocacy, because once I found my voice, I was like, oh boy, now I need to help other people find their voice, and collectively we need to be a voice and make some change.
Yeah. And you know, all of that drive that you had every time you wanted to make a goal happen, look at you go now.
Yes. And now it's like not even about the achievement of a goal as it is about like the winning of lives and the changing of systems, and just like really seeing where people get it, because there's still so much stigma and there's so many things that like hinder individuals from like even accessing like quality treatment or treatment in general, or just like recovery. Like not everybody, I realize how privileged and blessed I am, you know? And so I recognize that, and it's been like my mission to make sure that like people get some kind of access to help and support, you know, and that they get love still, even at their worst.
Absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, like, I think that's kind of where I feel so blessed that you walk into my life, because we share a love for trying to help people who are incarcerated be successful on the other side, get the treatment that they need, not only while they're in jail, but also get protection on board before they leave.
Yes.
We're doing MAT for inmates that wish to receive it prior to they leave jail, so that they don't go out and overdose
and die, because right now it's
their
like
dose is at 0.
Yeah,
you know? So
it's huge. I mean, there's so many people dying right now because of fentanyl. It's crazy. And fentanyl's I mean, you don't know what you're buying. Fentanyl's in everything. I tell people all the time,
there
like,
is no heroin.
There's not. And even in like cocaine, marijuana, like we collaborate with like the DEA and like the police in Broward County, and like we are seeing people overdose.
How much xylazine are you seeing?
Oh yeah,
like
it's
crazy.
Oh
huh?
yeah.
Guys, xylazine, look it up. That's tranq. And that is a veterinary drug that's being into the all of the substances, really, but especially in fentanyl. And Narcan does not work with that drug. So if it shuts down the respiratory system, it attaches to the opiate receptor on the skin, causing wounds. It's really just so much education is needed. We can't educate enough about all of these things. But I'm just so blessed to know you.
Yes, and I just have to share one more thing, because
please do.
The beautiful thing about my story, too, is that baby daddy that went to prison. And when he went to prison, you know, he was not really working on his life while he was in prison. And I knew that. And so at that time, I was now picking up the pieces and raising my son. And we had to go through a lot of healing. My son, families recover together, just so everybody knows. Like, they recover together. And my son is in recovery just as much as I'm in recovery.
Yeah, he's a child within.
Yeah, and we've walked through that process and his challenges and stuff like that, because he's gone through trauma. So now I'm on the preventative side and really like supporting his process, knowing and having that knowledge and insight to say like, hey, we're not doomed, because we're going to be a family that recovers together. And so I had been praying so much for his father, and not praying because I want to be with him, because at this point, like, I am so whole now. God was like, I'm going to make you a whole new person. And he did. And I was like, I don't need a man. Like, I've recovered not just from drugs and alcohol. You know, it was so much more than that, because it's so much deeper. There's a deeper root.
Your psyche is recovering
still,
and will be.
Absolutely. And so his father got out of prison. He served another 6 years. And so my son was 9 years old when his father got out of prison, and his father, for the first time, entered his process of recovery.
Oh, that's wild. That's so wild. I love that. That's great.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. He had another child in between that time. And so when he went to prison, that child was being born. And so he had not spent time with that child. And now today he is a full-time father to that child, a full-time father to his other child, and he has another daughter that was another termination of rights that he is now, that relationship has been restored. And so watching his process, and obviously he reached out to me. I was already in my recovery process. When I seen that he was serious about recovery and change, I brought my son up at 9 years old back up to Rabun County to see his father for the first time. And it had been a long time. And they have been building their relationship now. And then 3 years into that, me and his father ended up restoring our relationship. And so now our whole family's in recovery, which is so amazing. And, you know, the love.
That's congratulations.
Thank
I feel
you.
like that's a Brittany story too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just to sit on the outside. and watch them, it is just truly amazing because they've let their toxic love, but they fixed themselves and they've come back together.
Yeah, I mean,
so cute.
you couldn't have done that any other way.
No,
truly.
there's no way. There's no way. And God has really been like the center of it all, honestly, for our relationship, and has brought everything back in his time, which has been awesome. And because I was healthy, I knew, like, even when he got out of prison, like, there was no relationship that I wanted with him. I just wanted him to get well so he can be a father to my son, and my son wouldn't have to go through that trauma. And so as he was getting well, and it was just like, I would come up here so that they can spend time together. And I was so supportive of his recovery process. And like, years went by, and I've always loved him, but I just kind of turned that off because it wasn't about that as much as it was about like his recovery, his, him and his son and his other son, and just like wanting to like cultivate that. And so now today, like, we are a family, which is pretty amazing. God has like redeemed all of that, from 15 years ago. And we really are like working together to make an impact together as a family. So
that is such a good story. I love that. And you're how many years clean now?
August 20th will be 8 years.
Congratulations. That's a
Thank you.
big clap for you. That's huge.
Yep.
That's huge.
It was the day, I always tell people, it was the day that I left jail, and it was the last time I was ever in a jail cell. And now the only time I'm ever back in a jail is in order to bring a message, so
That's
God brings
awesome.
us right back to those places so that we can bring hope to other people. And that's really what my life today, that I want it to be about, is just like, how can I bring hope and love and support to individuals that are going through that same process, or I see myself in like every person that's, in that dark place, because I know what it's like to be in that dark place. And so to me, being able to let people know that there's hope, but not just let them know that there's hope, but reach out my hand and say, hey, let's walk this together, is like why I fell in love with peer work. And really in doing like the work of RCOs and things like that has been like so epic, it's that excellence, because watching the impact of individuals that have walked that journey, that are now like loving on and supporting other people, and you collectively are just watching lives change, and it's just amazing.
Well, we'll steal Mikey Sorrentino's little quote: "The comeback is always greater than the setback."
That's right. Yeah. So.
Well, Kayla, I think we'll wrap it up there, and thank you. That was 3 great episodes of your journey to excellence, and I appreciate you so much, and can't wait to work with you and have you back on the podcast with an update.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for tuning into the Clearly Well podcast. To state that please do not substitute this podcast for professional therapy or treatment. The content shared here is for informational and entertainment purposes only. We do ask our listeners to respect the diverse experiences of individuals and refrain from passing judgment. If you or someone you know needs professional help, please seek the guidance of a registered and qualified mental health professional. Clearly Well is brought to you by Healthy Georgia and produced by CNC Media.